I think it's been an entire cultural shift where we are starting to see mental health as what it really is, which it is a huge problem. And it is something that almost everybody faces in some form or fashion. And it's okay to talk about it.
How the heck are you keeping these people so long?
This is this person's idea. We're following through on it. They're also helping us make sure that we're doing it the right way. So now the next person that has an idea is going to step forward because they want that as well.
Unfortunately, being expected to pour into other people's cups with an empty cup.
The way I did grow up, yeah, you did not talk about anything. You just showed up and you did the job and you went home and, if you got hurt, rub some dirt in it. Keep on moving. Mentally, if something was wrong, you never said a word about that.
All right, guys, welcome back to another special episode of the HR Heroes series. I'm incredibly excited because I have a brand new guest with us today. Rick, thank you so much for hopping on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. I have a quote to start off today's conversation because I think it's going to open up some other avenues to conversation about your past. Courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. John Wayne. Now, what people might not know about Rick is that you have a history in rodeo. Why don't you give us a little bit of an explanation and kind of your history in rodeo and some of the things that you've done in the past?
Yeah, it was, grew up in Wyoming and was in FFA, but also in rodeo, saddle bronc, riding, out on ranches in the summer, been on a couple cattle drives as well. So it is a little bit different, but that's actually part of how I helped pay for college, was a scholarship and through it. So it was a lot of fun. Paying for it now, but it was a lot of fun at the time.
I mean, you mentioned that in our last call together that you had actually suffered an injury from that. So my question for you was, what is your favorite memory from rodeo, and what is your least favorite memory from rodeo?
Oh, I'd say my favorite memory is when I won my very first jackpot. So that's when I actually, got the full amount. Wasn't that much, but still, it was a win. Least favorite was my last ride because as soon as I got on, I knew I wasn't going to be able to do this again. It was, it just hurt too much, and I couldn't compete the way I needed to be able to compete. And when I hit the back and was laying there for a second, it's like, nope, this is it. And that was, it was a big part of my life at the time. So I had to figure out, okay, well, what do I take from this? And how do I make this into something better?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been so interested in the rodeo, specifically ever since I moved to Vegas in 2012. We have a huge regional rodeo that happens at the South Point here. And so once a year, trailers come down, we've got bulls, we've got cowboys walking around with hats and everything like that. And I'm like, dude, these guys are some of the toughest people, guys and girls, are some of the toughest people that I think I've ever come across. And so when I heard that you had a history in rodeo, I kind of wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that.
Well, it's a blast. And in Vegas, you've also got NFR out there too. So that is absolutely huge. And that's the goal of everybody is to get into there. But it's just, it's the people that do that are tough. You have to be. You do it for the love of it because you don't make a lot of doing it. But you do it because it's fun, you compete. And the ones who do multiple events or the guys who bulldog, that's impressive. Horses, at least, when you get bucked off, they don't want to kick you. They don't want to stomp you. They just want to get away from you.
I mean, it's definitely a dangerous lifestyle for sure. But, my heart goes out to you because I know getting hurt in any type of scenario is not easy. And especially when it means ending loving something that you do, that's got to be extra hard as well. So my next question for you is, once we left rodeo, you start getting into some different sectors and stuff like that. Let's talk about some of your early HR experience in your professional career and some of the great organizations you worked for.
Was actually starting off with Waukesha State Bank and getting into the financial sector, but it was also, they were a small bank, privately owned, only had a couple branches, so they didn't have a real strong HR presence. So it was kind of developing that HR presence. And I got to work with some great people that had been doing HR for a long, long time and kind of introduced me to what it was. And it was not what I went to school for. I went to school for ag education and ag business. I had no intention of going into HR whatsoever. but was able to, through that one, kind of got me going into it a little bit. From there, went to work with McGuanago, which was bought out again. So it was working the branch manager, who was also our HR rep for the local place. And then she kind of transferred those responsibilities over to me. So I got my first taste of being an HR actual person as well. And then it was going down to Florida and working with the company down there that was Buckhead Beef. That's when I really got to see HR, and having to do HR for a diverse group of people was very different for me. They put me into a cut room where there was a large group of people from Puerto Rico and from Dominican Republic, and they weren't real happy with each other. They all had knives, and they said, "Okay, Rick, go find out what's going on with them and figure out what we can do to make it better." So the room was 34 degrees, and I just walked in and went, "Okay, I'm either going to come out of here, it's going to be a good thing, or I'm going to be carried out on the stretcher. One of the two is going to happen."
Man, I know I've had a lot of experience. When my dad was growing up, one of his first jobs was actually in a slaughtering plant in Eastern Washington. And so he talks about the days of, running around with the knife and stuff like that and absolutely touching his wrist and having it split open. So when you talk about those guys hanging out in that room with those knives, those are some real knives that we're dealing with as well.
Oh, it is. And they were real upset with each other.
Man, that's wild. Well,
so it's kind of a trial by fire.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that you also kind of spent a little bit of time from our previous discussion with Disney as well. And when I think of organizational culture, I think about doing all the right things correctly every single day. I think of Disney. What was that experience like?
Disney was amazing. What they offer and some of the training that they offer, and Disney is an entire culture. I mean, to this day, I still point with two fingers because that's what they teach you. It has changed a little bit, but it still is all about guest satisfaction. And when you do the HR side of things with them, or when you do the management side of things, it is satisfaction of your employees. Because if your employees weren't satisfied, they can't satisfy the guests, and that is everything that Disney is focused on. So it was absolutely amazing to see what lengths they would go to and what they expected you to do, how they expected you to listen. It was, if someone has a problem, everything else stops. That is now your 100% focus. You can't split your focus. You can't, give the answer of, well, check in with me and I'll get back to you later, or we'll get an interview. It's, nope, okay, right now, let's talk about it. What is it?
Wow. I mean, I've always thought that some of our best leaders come from those organizations that show us how to demonstrate culture, to take care of each other, but more importantly, create that customer experience that I think is so necessary for today. And I think that that customer experience hits in so many different areas because, and I was talking on somebody else in a previous episode about kind of the consumer culture that we're in today, right? Everybody wants what they want when they want it. And normally that means now. And I think that a lot of our employees today, when they go into an organization and work for a team, expect a lot of that consumer culture centric, I would say, ideals to be pushed forward as well. Being able to enable team members with certain things, being respectful, giving them the best experience possible is not just outward facing, but it's also inward facing as well.
Oh, I agree completely. And they do expect it because we're expecting them to treat whatever industry you're in, whether it's healthcare like I'm in now or when it was in sales. They expect you to treat the customer immediately and take care of them. Well, as a leader, your customer is your employees. Your customer isn't the actual customers of the company, it's the employees themselves. And so how you expect them to react is how you should react as well.
Absolutely. I mean, there's been a trend that seems to be happening in business across all different sectors over the last couple of years, and that's been turnover. Specifically, when it comes to large layoffs, financial metrics maybe aren't met, or maybe they are, but there's still a dwindling of staff by, saying that these certain people aren't necessary for us to meet our goals anymore, yada, yada. Now, I provided some information ahead of the conversation. From teambuilding.com, there was 14 reasons that turnover is happening in 2024, or the reasons it will happen. And a couple of these are very interesting on this list. Number one is a lack of growth and progression. Number four, which I think is really pertinent to a lot of people today, is inadequate compensation. And I want to take a deeper dive into that. But also we've got diversity, deficiencies, life events, organizational restructuring, which I know a lot of organizations are going through, including some of yours that you've worked for in the past, poor workplace culture, which I want to talk on as well, and then a lack of recognition and appreciation, which I think is huge. And I feel like the Disney organization was really good from the outside looking in at that recognition and appreciation. Is that true?
They were. They were very good at it. They had things like Camp Mini Mickey. They had things for all the employees. You got passes in. You got a lot of recognition. They have cut a lot of that. They went through a lot of these things. The reorg. They had someone come in that just sliced everything to the bone, way too deep. And now you're starting to see that. You're hearing reports out of Disney that the parks aren't as nice. The employees, the vacation isn't as magical as it once was. A lot of that is because they took away all that stuff that made you proud to be a Disney employee. That made it, where you really enjoyed it, even though maybe you weren't paid the greatest, and they weren't, but it was still everything else that came with it made it worthwhile to do that job and made you love your job. And they've taken a lot of that away where people don't love the job anymore. And now you're seeing the results of that.
I mean, taking pay away from the employees is something that I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into. This is number 4 from our list, but this is inadequate compensation. So according to a recent study from Bamboo HR, a whopping 73% of employees said that they are considering leaving their current job for a higher paycheck. And 48% have thought about doing so in the last 6 months. But what's really interesting is the amount of a pay bump that they're willing to leave for. In 2024, they said it's on average of 13.3% compared to 16.1% in 2023. So why are people willing to leave their jobs for less these days?
They're unsatisfied with the job, and first of all, and then they're looking at the pay and saying, okay, well, I'm expected to do more and more, and I'm not getting any pay increases. In fact, they may be frozen, or they're seeing new people come in, and because they're trying to hire new people, you raise up your range, you raise your rate, you're bringing them in where they're a lot closer, and that compression is completely off. The equity is completely off. So I've been here for 5 years. I'm making $30 an hour. You bring somebody new in, and they're at $27 an hour. Well, they don't have my experience. Why are they making almost as much as I am? And if they're going to get, they get retention bonuses, they get all kinds of things. Why don't I get any of that? Where's my compensation? The only way to get that is for me to go somewhere else. Even if it isn't for as much as I used to be able to jump ship for, it's still enough to where I feel that I'm being compensated, or at least I'm being recognized for my ability.
I feel like
and that's what the things.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, especially in healthcare, right? I mean, ever since the pandemic, one of my former roommates and one of my really good friends is a travel nurse. And the amount of money that she was getting paid to travel from state to state from these organizations and agencies was mind-blowing to me. And in our previous conversation, you talked about that friction, if you will, between those contract resources and those homegrown resources who are in your organization. So why don't you kind of spill the beans on that for us a little bit?
A lot of it is, yeah, it's true. You're right. The travelers, especially during COVID, travelers would come in, and our regular employee would be getting $42 an hour. A traveler would come in at $100, $120, $160 an hour. Some of that money was going to an agency that they were paying for, but a lot of it was going to that person's pocket. And they were coming in for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. And then maybe we'd re-up them, maybe we wouldn't. But they were also usually getting a stipend as well for a living, that a lot of them found ways around, so they get to pocket a lot of that too. And you would then talk to our regular employees about giving a little more, maybe picking up an extra shift, or why were they calling out? Why weren't they willing to do more? And they would turn and look right at the traveler and say, well, why don't you ask that person? But that person had a rock solid contract. We can only do so much. So we couldn't really talk to them that much. We couldn't ask them to do more. And it really, really killed us, because why are the employees going to go above and beyond when they're not making near what this person's making, and that person has a much easier job? So why don't I become that person? Why don't I go travel? Because there's always, all the healthcare industries were sniping from each other. It was, okay, well, that person's going down, but I got all their employees, so I'm good for a month or two until all those employees now want to jump to the next place. Now, it was not uncommon to see employees with 3 months on their resume multiple times.
Yeah. I mean,
because they just were going, okay, someone else is willing to pay me more.
And I feel like there's almost become a culture, if you will, of, I don't want to call it like job hopping, because I don't think that's the appropriate terminology in this situation. But I mean, there was so much incentive out there for people to say, I'm going to come work for your organization. I'm going to take all the resources that I possibly can, and then I'm on to the next one because it comes with an additional bonus, a stipend, all that different type of stuff.
Oh, definitely. And I wouldn't say it's job hopping. It's more of compensation seeking. And it was people going, okay, well, I'm going to try to get as much as I can. And a lot of it is that feeling of, well, for years, I've given up everything to this company and they've taken as much as they can for me. Here's my opportunity to start taking back. And regardless if I've worked for you before or not, I still lump you in the same way. They didn't look at it as a company that you had any loyalty to, you had any feelings for. It was just, how do I get as much as I can, as quickly as I can, before I go to the next place to do the same thing again. And a lot of people felt it was very deserved, and it's not wrong to think that necessarily. What is on the company then is to figure out, well, how do I attract that person, and then how do I get them to stay?
I mean, that retention effort really is kind of like I would say, the promised land from an HR perspective. And I know we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into that and some of the stuff that you've done and the tactics that you've been able to institute. But the one thing that I kind of think about today, especially in the world of our current state of the economy, it seems like a lot of these elements of being upset that I'm not getting paid enough, all these different types of things kind of play into an overall picture of financial wellness. And one of the things that I found in preparation for today's conversation was the Bank of America annual workplace benefits report. Surveyed over 1,300 employees and 800 employers in the first half of 2023. And it found that financial wellness from the employee perspective was at an all-time low since 2010 at 42%. Why do you think financial wellness has taken such a heavy dip over the last couple of years?
I've seen it in the last few years with some of the tools that we've rolled out as companies, different companies I've worked for, where we allow people to access to their paychecks whenever they want. They can take advances on their paychecks. And then when it comes time for their payday, there's no money. And they don't understand that. People don't have the same idea about money as they used to. Also, it has been, well, if I just jump over here, I can get more money. But they're not doing anything with that money. We're not educating people when they come in about retirement vehicles and stuff like we used to be. It's something you mention, but you really don't. People don't really do it that much. You're more focused on the immediate gain. And so whatever I can put in front of me right now, that's what I want to do. But then I'm also going to turn around and spend all that money. You're not saving a lot of things. You can look at it in the terms of benefits. HSAs, the health savings accounts, almost no one takes those options anymore. I have hired in the last, I'd say 6 years, I have hired well over 5,000 people into different industries. And maybe 10% of those people have actually taken an HSA. Everyone's gone for the other benefits, even though the HSA really could save you money, but it's because it is taking money, saving it, and then I can't touch it. They don't want that. It's instant gratification is what they're looking for, which also leads to a lot of the reason why I'm willing to jump ship so much, because I'm instantly gratified and I'm instantly recognized.
Dude, I mean, that was a perfect segue into my next kind of sub question beneath that is like, is this a macroeconomic issue, or are there like social drivers behind what we're experiencing as a culture in general? Because I feel like more so we're treating the symptoms of financial unwellness rather than the cause of what it is. And I can't help but say, first of all, it comes down to education, because when I was coming through school, right, I went to college preparatory school, all this type of stuff. We never learned about how to manage money. We never learned about how to balance a checkbook, never learned about what a loan is, what interest is, credit cards, what's good, what's bad. But more importantly, I feel like today we're caught up in the societal norm of that instant gratification, which you referenced, which is I get money, I want to spend it on something. And I actually saw a TikTok the other day of this guy who's a millennial, and he was speaking for everybody. And he's like, I think why the economy's still going is because us millennials and everybody else wants their little treats. Life is so tough these days that as soon as we get our paycheck, we want to run somewhere and buy ourselves a treat for basically surviving. And that's how the economy continues to run. We're not saving money. We can't afford homes. We can't do this stuff. So we're continuing to take micro purchases to fill almost our ego or that empty hole inside of us, which is so interesting.
I completely agree. And I see it every day when people come in to see me talk about their different issues, their problems, why they're looking to get more money, why they think they deserve more money, or why they're jumping ship somewhere else, is because, well, I have these bills, I have these spendings. And I've actually sat down with some of them and said, okay, let's go over it. Let's see if we can help you in any way, especially when I was more on the financial side of it. And a lot of it is they have no idea. Like you said, they have never done any kind of training on that. No one's ever walked them through what a budget is. They don't really, you don't look beyond this day. You don't look 30 days, 60 days, a year down the road. You're only looking at what you can do today. And even if that means that, okay, I go out and buy this today, I'm not going to be able to pay the bill that's due tomorrow. Well, I'll worry about that tomorrow. And that is where we've got into such a huge crisis in our economy. People are making money, but they owe so much money. And it's so easy to get credit card debt and get people to float you money that by the time you turn around, you can't afford that anymore. But then you still have influencers. You still have someone who tells you that you need to go buy these things. So you do, because you want your treat. You want that instant gratification. You want that feeling of, oh, I got this. I'm doing really well. Even though I look around and realize that, my place isn't great, or I don't have a whole lot of food, or, I may not be making rent next month, but I've got this. And so I'm happy. And I can put it out there. I can take a picture of it, and I can show everybody what I have.
Yeah, I mean, there's just like so many societal pressures. You know what I mean? It's like flexing for the gram, as people say on Instagram, is a real thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it comes in so many different forms. It's not even so much a Gucci belt, but it's like people running around and just spending money on trips and doing stuff, like you said, when I can't pay rent back home, but I need to put out the image, right? Or put out that mask, play my own PR manager of my life is great. And I'm not sure what you guys are doing, but it seems like so many people are struggling so much more. And it turns into the problem of turnover in an organization, right? I mean, if you've got your individual pressures and my employer can't meet those needs, then I'm going to go look for the next job, like we've kind of talked about.
Yeah, hopefully I'm going to find a job that's going to pay more. I've also got my social group is very social. They go out quite a bit, and I've got to keep up with them. So I have to make sure that my job lets me do that. And if my job doesn't, and the only way I can afford all these things if I work a lot more hours, well, there's got to be a place I can go and do more, and I'll get a little bit more money so I can make it work. But then they run into the same issue, because it's still never saving that money. It's still never cutting back. And then when a company wants to cut back, they don't understand it at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I understand why I'm doing it because I need more cash, but you guys better be able to come up with more cash to pay me for these reasons. And it just like creates that interesting dichotomy. You know what I mean?
It does, completely. And then companies they, like I said, at the beginning, when they do cut out a whole workforce because, we can make this work with just these, it doesn't. Because people don't buckle down and just, okay, fine, I'll get it done. It's, no, I'm not doing that anymore. And so companies aren't understanding that either, because they're in the same boat. They want to have more and more. They want to increase that profit, not realizing that, okay, that's profit. That is money you've made after you've paid all your bills.
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, I hope that we're going to be able to navigate the next couple of years as we kind of navigate through this. But unfortunately, there's no better teacher than failure, or no better teacher than pain. And so sometimes you have to go through these life experiences, unfortunately, to experience them on your own and realize, man, maybe I was focusing on the wrong stuff, which is a terrible experience, but I think we all have to go through it. You know what I mean?
Oh, I agree. And I think you're going to see coming out of the medical field is going to be a leader to how the other industries should go. We've gone through that pain already. COVID hit us hard. But now we're starting to come through where we're looking at pay equity, we're looking at compression, we're trying to, what can we do to get people to stay? And for us, it's a licensed individual, so it's a very unique job. And you can easily go anywhere and get another job because everybody's looking. So we are already finding out, how do we get around that? How do we change that? So your other industries, your supply chain, those ones, they're going to follow what we're doing now, and they're going to learn from us.
I think a good section for us to go into next is kind of the difference of turnover versus retention, specifically long-term retention. What are those differences? Because I know that's super important for us to be able to communicate to people, especially those of us who are listening from the healthcare space. Turnover's been a consistent in our organizational space for a long time. But now, like organizations like you are trying to make that shift towards long-term retention and retention in general. So what is the difference between turnover and retention?
Turnover is really, you've got your quick quits, then you've got your retention. You're really looking at is within that first 90 days, 6 months, a year. That is where your turnover rate is really hurting you. Your turnover rate at past a year is always a lot less. If someone sticks out for a year with you, they're probably going to stay for 2, probably for 3, unless there isn't any way they can move up or any progression. But it's that first year. That is where your turnover hits. So when you're talking retention, you're talking, how do I get somebody to stay past a year? What can I do to get them to stay here? Because once they do, people be kind of become comfortable. Okay, I'm not going to change my job. But in that first 90 days, you can make all the difference in the world. In your first week, you can make the difference. It's your training, everything else. But that's where they have expectations where we'll bring on 10 people into an orientation, And one of the first things I'll get at the end of the week is, okay, well, how many people quit? So meaning they showed up for a day or two and then just poofed. And it's how do you turn that around? How do you make sure that that's not going to happen? That's how you affect your turnover. Then your retention is, okay, I've got past that first year. Now, what do I do for my employees to grow my employees so then they want to stay? And when they have that and they're showing those new people coming in how great it is here after a year, that, look at all the things I can do. That's going to get that long-term retention growing as well. So you've got to work on both sides of it. You've got to work with the brand new people and get them to buy in as quickly as they can. And then you got to make sure your longer term people are still buying into the idea and are feeling that they have something to do. It can be very little. It can be just the tiniest little title change. It can be a tiny step in pay. It doesn't have to be these huge grand things, but it's just so they're always growing. And if you don't offer that, you are not going to have retention.
So let me ask the question. How is Rick implementing, I would say, these tactics on a daily basis that has other people asking, how the heck are you keeping these people so long? What is kind of your perspective on that?
One of the things is I take a notebook, and when I have a new person come in, first thing I do is I write down 3 things. I ask them 3 things, like, hey, what do you like to do? What are your interests? Tell me about things that excite you. And I'll write down 3 of those things, and then every time they come in to have a meeting, that's what you bring up first. You don't talk about business right away. You say, okay, I know I'm going to meet with Mark later, and Mark really likes golf. He has a kid, and he has a car he loves. Okay, when he sits down, I'm going to ask him about something about that. Did he play golf this weekend? What did he do? Relax the conversation a little bit. Show some interest in him. Ideally, you won't need that after a little while, but it depends on how many employees you have and how often you see somebody. But then you go into the conversation, but it changes the whole tone of the conversation. Then it is following up on things, communication. I will, when I talk to an employee and they ask for something, I say, okay, I'm going to send this to you, but I'm also going to send you the email so you can see the chain of what we've decided to do or what's going on. You can see that, yes, I did send in this form. I did make this request. So you are part of this conversation now. It's not something that, I'm not going to have them CC into the chain itself, but I will take that chain and forward that on to them. So I show them what we're doing, as long as it's information that I can share with them. That alone makes them super happy, because at least they see something's happening. And then it is following up. If I can tell them what I can, go on the floor, giving recognition, or at least I had an employee today that she came to me about a month ago and was talking about how that was doing 2 different jobs, but would like to see about getting a possible raise. So I looked into it and found out, yeah, sure enough, it was actually signed on for a unit secretary, but now is also doing teletech. That was supposed to come with a raise. It had never been done. It had just fallen by the wayside, and no one ever really looked at it. So then I went ahead and analyzed everybody that's in that position and fixed about 75% of the employees that weren't correct.
Wow.
And so went up to the floor today and met with everybody and called them all together for a meeting and said, by the way, you, the ones over here, you were never correct. You were not making where you're supposed to. Over here, you have been making what you're supposed to. But this is also where I'm looking at what we can do, and I would like you to tell me why it is that you feel you should have more money, because I want to make sure it's equitable across the field, and why I couldn't increase your pay because you already had it for the job you're doing. Do you feel that what you're doing is worth it, and why would you need more compensation? Of course, they had good reasons. They wanted more compensation, but they also were able to start giving me some reasons of what I was looking for. So now I'm going to roll that into the expectations for the position and say, okay, well, you're meeting these. Yes, we can look at maybe a little more pay bump. But I also said everyone should know that this employee right here is the reason why we're here. She came to me, asked about these things, and you should all thank her, because this should have been done, yes, but it wasn't something that was a top of mind for me. I was focused on other areas. Now I'm focused on this. Now I'm going to go ahead and do this for the rest of the employees as well. It's because she brought an issue to me and spoke up.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's all about, from my perspective, the human experience of human resources, right? Being able to show up, ask questions, be a little bit curious, and ask if, hey, am I supposed to get a raise with this? But also, I think about how surprised those other employees must have been that you were being proactive about the process of coming forward and being like, hey guys, I did some analysis and you're not being paid enough. So we're going to make an adjustment. How did they kind of respond to that? Because I feel like often going and asking for a raise is such a scary experience because you feel like you're asking for something that maybe you don't deserve.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I asked the way I did was, okay, the ones I couldn't bump something up, give me some reasons why you should. But it was most of them were flat out surprised. They actually were a little almost hostile at first, like, why? What are you expecting us to do? What else are you adding?
Oh, wow.
It was they thought there was a catch somewhere. So I walked them through exactly why and said, no, there's not a catch. This is also something that should have been done. It should have been fair. It was missed. So I owe you an apology for this, but now it has been fixed. It's been rectified. But now we want to look at going forward. What's the next step? How else are we going to do this? And that's what I need your help with is give me some solutions. Give me some ideas of how we can build some sort of ladder that you guys can keep moving up. And it's going to happen again because I'm going to be doing it with each department, looking at it. And I know there's going to be some people that were missed. So it's fixing those ones and then talking to them. But it has already resulted in I've had 2 employees that came in to get resignations, and they are now staying.
Yeah, let me take that back.
They didn't quit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even though one of them was actually looking at a job that was paying more than we're paying, and I couldn't match it, but she loved the environment here. It was just felt like she wasn't being heard, and she wasn't being recognized. So I was able to bring her compensation up a little bit, but I was also able to give her an official title to have it so that her efforts are being recognized. And now is going to stay with us and turn down a job that most people would jump on pretty quickly because of the benefits and things. That was going to the VA versus a private hospital like us.
Man, I mean, one of my favorite sayings is it's not always about what you have to give, but how you give it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like that has a huge, I would say, ability to be leveraged appropriately, especially when we're talking about retaining employees long term. And at the end of the day, when it comes back to the topic of like appreciation, like we had mentioned a little bit earlier in the episode, people want to be appreciated. They want to be recognized. They want to be seen. And that's a commonality that you hear all the time in this podcast is employees just want to be treated like actual people rather than just butts in a seat or a number on an org chart, which is totally understandable.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Completely. And it's extremely true. That was my employee today said, thank you for hearing me. And yes, I was able to do a lot of action, but I've also had it where I couldn't do anything. And I will tell them, I've looked into this. This is what I can't do more for you at this moment. But here's why. Here's what it is going on. And here is what I need you to do that will help me so it can. I do need you to go above me. I need you to make that complaint. And, yes, it's not going to hurt me. It's say that I couldn't do any more. But I need you to keep pursuing this. And I will help you pursue it. And I will put in my own notice as well of this. But it is just getting that employee as part of it and letting them be part of it. The other big part of it, too, is when they do make decisions, making sure you get all your employees a feeling about it. Talk to them about what we're deciding to do, why we're deciding to do it. And unless it's something that we're being required to do by a regulation, it's, okay, we're thinking about making a change. What does everyone think about this? Get that feedback before you do it. And then that way you can say, okay, well, based upon everyone's feedback, here's what we decided to do. Here's the why. Now, if they want to complain about it, it's a lot harder because they help make that decision.
I mean, we're involving everybody, right? And I feel like, especially when we talk about the topic of pay equity, which is going to be next, there are so many other things outside of direct compensation that we can use as an ability to retain people and make them feel a part of the team. So according to the Arbridger Institute, there were 5 workplace trends to prepare for in 2024. So I'm going to rip through these really quick. Number 1 is redefining the employee experience. Number 2 is bridging the divide between leaders and employees. Number 3 is turning performance reviews on their head. Number 4 is catalyzing communication to improve collaboration, like we just kind of talked about. And number 5 is prioritizing training and development to boost performance. Let's go to the top of the list here, and let's talk about redefining employee experience. Now, one of the things that we've seen over the last couple of years, especially, is employees are expecting more and more when it comes to an organization stepping up and going to bat for them around things like their mental wellness and overall well-being. Why do you think that these big shifts have started coming into the workspace now where people are like, I need to be taken care of as a whole person rather than just somebody who's executing tasks in the organization?
I think it's been an entire cultural shift where we are starting to see mental health as what it really is, which it is a huge problem. And it is something that almost everybody faces in some form or fashion. And it's okay to talk about it. For the longest time, especially in the workplace, you didn't talk about anything like that. If you were sick, that was even, if you were physically ill, that was even something you really didn't talk about. You didn't report an injury. You didn't do this because you might get fired, you might get let go. So if you came in and said that you were battling depression, chances are pretty good that you were going to get termed. And that kind of just held over for the longest time. Now we're finally getting to that point. The generations coming up, the way people are talking, we're finally making it where it's okay to talk about that. And it's been, okay, that's not a bad thing. And now it's, well, how do we help you? Just like we have changed it where if you are injured on the job, you cannot be let go because of that. Just because you report it, just because it's a workman's comp case. No, that's not going to get you terminated. And in fact, if a company does that, it's going to cost them quite a bit. We're now starting to see that behavior coming through into companies too, going, so no, I understand now that you do need some help. That the fact that you're battling depression, you have a diagnosis of any kind, you need help with that. No different than the PTO I provide you for sick leave. No different than the benefits I provide you to make sure that if your child is sick, that they're taken care of. Well, you need this too. So we need to come up with make sure we have that mental health. It's still really new. It's not something that we have done a wonderful job with yet, but we're starting to see more and more of it and more acceptance of it, especially in the medical field. Again, it's kind of leading the way because we have nurses that are burning out. We have staff members that are completely burning out. And a large part of that is they weren't being taken care of for their mental health. They were just expected to come in, fill that void, take care of someone else. Now we're finally looking at how do we take care of them? What do we need to do for them? Providing counselors, providing that mental health days, but also providing things within the building itself. Okay, here's a quiet room. Here's a place where you can go that you can sit and just enjoy some white noise. We're also just something as simple as, hey, we're going to turn down a lot of these beeps. There's a lot of stuff that is not necessary. Let's turn those down so you don't have that constant in the background, which is driving you absolutely crazy. Now, if it's a medically necessary one, like the call light, sure, that's going to still go off. But these other machines over here, they don't need to make the noise they're making. Let's turn them down. And that little change has made a huge change for the way that the staff feels on the floor. Because like, okay, you're doing something to try to help me. You're trying to make things better for me. And you're actually listening to me. Open door policies, where you can go in and you can walk into my CEO's office right now and just vent to him. And he will listen to you. May not be able to help it with everything, but he'll listen. And that has been a huge part because we're just hearing people. And sometimes you just need that. You just need to go in and yell at somebody. You just need to get it off your chest. And then maybe there is no solution at that exact moment, but they don't want a solution. They just want to be able to tell somebody what's going on that actually understands and that can listen to them. And they're tired of telling just their family members. They're tired of telling their dog. They're tired of telling their friends when they go out. They want someone at their workplace just to listen.
Sometimes that's all we really need is just somebody to hold space with us. When I first got started in the mental health space back in 2014, I started seeing a lot of burnout, a lot of resiliency issues, a lot of compassion fatigue with the nursing teams and everybody else we'd work with. But then, especially because of the pandemic, it seems like it got accelerated tenfold. And so a lot of the work that we do here at Francis with my company is supporting that workforce of nurses, of administrators, of people who are getting literally run through the system every single day, showing up, being their best self, and unfortunately being expected to pour into other people's cups with an empty cup. And it's like sometimes we just need the time to be able to kind of hold space on our own. So I love the example of the quiet room, because imagine how peaceful that quiet room is when you're hearing the alarms going off from the respirator machines and everything else that's going on all day. That piece is, I'm sure, incredibly important. But I couldn't agree more with you. Mental wellness in itself at the end of the day has become less and less stigmatized. And as you were talking in the beginning of, your answer there, I was thinking about kind of like the male perspective. Right? You being from a history in Wyoming and Rodeo, you guys are tough people. Often you're not the type of person who's going to vent about the things that's going on in life. You're kind of going to be somebody who's going to show up, do the work every single day, and you got a job to do. And I went through a lot of that as an athlete as well. I mean, I almost feel like because a lot of our masculine culture went into business over the last couple decades, that's kind of how we bled into this world of you don't talk about mental health. You don't need to talk about those things. It's a sign of weakness. And I feel like we're finally getting out of that, which is so important.
Oh, completely. And I agree. It's a lot of it is the way I did grow up. Yeah, you did not talk about anything. You just showed up and you did the job and you went home and if you got hurt, rub some dirt in it. Keep on moving. Mentally, if something was wrong, oh, you never said a word about that. So I do like the fact that it is changing so much that you're seeing, especially like my son is, he's worried about everybody, but he pays attention to it, and he makes sure that people are okay with things. He will call out somebody immediately if they say something that could be hurtful or could be in some way racist, bigoted, anything like that. He'll come on immediately. He has no fear of doing that. Something I never would have done when I was a child. There's no way. You do not call out an adult. He does, and I think it's amazing. It's what we need to have because we're eliminating those things out of this. In the job culture, we're finally starting to eliminate them a lot faster. We've always said you're protected. You come into a place, we don't discriminate, you have no harassment. But there still was a lot of it that was allowed to happen because, well, as long as it didn't get to HR, it doesn't matter. If you have a boss that harasses you a little bit, that's okay. Just let it slide by because you need that job. Now you're not seeing that. You're seeing things where you say something that's being stopped immediately, and it truly is being lived up to no, we're not allowing, we have a zero tolerance policy, and it's going to happen, and we're not discriminating against someone, especially for mental health. If you are suffering from anything, or if you do have something that is an issue, no problem. We're going to work with you. We're going to see what we can do to make it better, not put you off to the side, be uncomfortable, not talk about it, or make it 10 times worse because we're going to expect you just to deal with it on your own and still show up and be a certain way. And we're now making allowances like, okay, what do we need to do so that you can work and you can perform? And then it's, okay, where can we compromise with everything? And that compromising has been a huge change from what it has been for the last 50 years.
Absolutely. I want to take a second to do a public shout out to your kid because he sounds like an awesome individual. It reminds me a lot of when I was younger. I've always been a big guy. So what you can't tell across the screen is I'm 6'6", 240 pounds. So I'm a big dude, right? And I've always thought it was awesome to stand up for the people who didn't have a voice for themselves. And that was something that I was known for in like middle school and when I went to high school and yada, yada. And so I feel like me and your son would get along very well if we were in the same age demographic and stuff like that, going to school together.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
And he does it. He's just great. He's great about it. And it's just instinctual to him. And it's not, he doesn't have to stop and think about it. I've been doing this for a very long time, but I still occasionally have to say, okay, what should my response be? His is just automatic because that's what he was raised with already. So it is a huge change.
Yeah, I mean, it's a direct reflection of you, Rick. And I'm sure, your partner as well. Everything that you guys have done to raise that individual through those little tiny micro interactions, you now have raised somebody who's willing to stand up for people. I mean, here in Vegas, unfortunately, there was a story over the last couple months of a high school student who unfortunately was beaten to death by a group of kids at a high school here. And he was jumped in the first place because he was standing up for another student who had his AirPods taken away. And there are so many things that have been said in the news about how brave this young man was for standing up for somebody else. And unfortunately, it seems like in our society with social media especially, the bullies are more popular than the person who's actually going to stand up and do what's right. And so we need more people like your son. So I know we've gone a little bit of a rant here with how awesome your kid is, but I think it's just really important for the youth especially to understand how important these things really are because they can really save lives.
100% it is. Yeah. But that's also, you can also take that and apply it directly to the workforce as well. It's just as important for your strong workers, the people that are good, the ones that will stand up, to do so. Stand up for the other people around you. If you see someone who's afraid to speak up, is being harassed, is being bullied at work, and they don't want to say anything, speak for them. It's okay to go and say, okay, hey, I know someone's got a problem. What can we do about it?
Yeah, completely.
Because my job would be is then to go find out how we can do it so that person doesn't feel uncomfortable, but does get the help they need.
Absolutely. I want to use that as kind of a transition to my second point, and we're going to wrap it up here because we're running a little tight on time, which is bridging the divide between leaders and employees. So one of the things that you mentioned a couple minutes ago as people are listening was the open door policy that your CEO has. What effect has that had on the culture of your organization, and what other things are happening behind the scenes to kind of, eliminate that divide?
Oh, it's huge. We have an open door. Everyone has an open door policy. My door, unless I'm in a meeting, does not shut. And so I can be in here doing anything. People walk by, and it's just they can say hi. They can just stop in. It's a huge help for him as well. And it can be absolutely anybody. And people love that because they feel like they're actually being able to get their voice heard. Another divide too is that is overcoming is we work different shifts. So our administration, I will come in and I will work a night shift. My CEO will be here on a Saturday night. He'll be here on a Sunday morning. So we're making sure we're seeing everybody. We're a 24-hour operation, but it's not just Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 that gets everybody. No, we people will have we require it that you come in at different times so you can make sure you're always there and not just a half hour of their shift and you go home. No, it's you're going to be here for hours, and that way you're providing the same access that everyone else gets. So you're making sure that they're being heard and you're seeing what's going on. You're following up on it. Another one too is making sure you empower your people. We have taken the middle management leaders, our house soups, giving them the ability to say, okay, here's a regular conversation. When you have a conversation with somebody, that counts just as much as the director of nursing or the CEO or myself having a conversation with somebody. We're going to write it down. You're going to sign it. The person will sign what they said it. And then that is enough for me to say, if something else happens, yeah, I can follow up on a disciplinary action with that because of what you've done. So what you say matters. Or I can follow up on a commendation, or I can follow up for some recognition because, again, we are taking what you said and we're valuing you as a leader. Those leaders are usually overlooked. They do they're the ones right there working with everybody, but they generally have to follow. They'd have to go to the director and grab somebody, hope that person's going to listen. Now they can do it themselves. And so that then is trickling down to the regular staff as well, because now the staff members are thinking, okay, I'm seeing things being changed because the person that I go to every day can actually affect change now.
I mean, I hear a lot of conversation about, eliminating the hierarchical standards of old organizations and leaning into more of a flat type of organization. And the only example that's coming to the front of my head right now is an example from Tesla, which is really interesting. One of their field engineers, or somebody who was working on the assembly plant, figured out a way to get the Model 3s to charge like an extra 50 miles per minute or something crazy. He took that directly to one of his engineering directors, and within, I want to say, 6 hours, they had to change the assembly line so they could actually get better ampage and better battery charging through that. And it was one of the people who was on the front line who was spending time actually doing the work who brought that suggestion to the table, and then the organization switched incredibly quickly because of the proficiencies that it created. And I feel like that's that example of that flat organization.
Oh, it is 100%. It's when someone comes up to you and they talk about it, you act on it right away. But the big part of that there, and what Tesla did right as well in that instance, is they also recognized that engineer. They made sure that it wasn't, oh, I came up to it and now it's the director or the CEO is saying, oh, I had this great idea, and that's where the idea came from. No, this is this person's idea. We're following through on it. They're also helping us make sure that we're doing it the right way. They're involved in that. So they're elevated that to director level temporarily to make sure that goes through. And everyone sees it, okay, that was the person that did it. That was and so they're getting their proper credit for it. So now the next person that has an idea is going to step forward because they want that as well. Now, they may not want to be called out in front of everybody because not everybody likes that, but they still want that recognition. They still want to know that my ideas count. But they're going to be my ideas still. And we're going to work with you, not say, oh, thank you very much. That's now my idea, and you go back to doing your job.
It's the definition of agency, right? Having an impact on our environment. And when you feel like you have agency, you're willing to stand up, you're willing to talk about your ideas, you're willing to contribute to the bigger vision and mission, which I think is really awesome. Rick, this has been an absolute pleasure being able to learn a little bit more about your rodeo history, talking about some of the cultural experiences you've had with some amazing organizations, the changes that you're making in yours today, especially in a challenge space like healthcare. I think it's just so important for you to be recognized. And so I want you to use the last couple seconds here as an opportunity to tell people where they can find more about you. How can they learn more about the work that you're doing? Where can they find you if it's on LinkedIn or something like that?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and then if you want to find out more, it's with the Viber Hospital, Viber Specialty Hospitals, and I'm in the Portland area, but it is a long-term acute care, and it is providing a very, very necessary service for people who are coming out of the hospital. They're really injured, but they're not really ready to go home yet. We get them walking, we get them moving, we get them where they're ready to go home. And so if you have any interest in that, please look us up. It's a great, great organization.
Amazing. Well, I mean, it's not just about the nursing capabilities there, but it's also about the culture of the organization that I feel like people want to be a part of as well. So I definitely suggest you guys go check out Rick on LinkedIn. More importantly, go check out his organization as well, just in case you're in the Portland area or you're in the Pacific Northwest, which is near home to my heart as well. I was born in Maple Valley, Washington, just outside Seattle. So that Portland area I know is going crazy with so many people moving to the area. So I'm sure that your guys' services are absolutely needed. Rick, thank you so much for being on the show, man. I really appreciate it. Guys, it's been a new episode of our HR Heroes. And once again, let's give a little bit of a round of applause for Rick and the great work that he's doing. Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
That's a wrap.